Professor, I've so enjoyed your insights that you continue to share, and everyone around the world knows you for the escalation trap. And this is something that the United States government, Donald Trump, has been deeply intertwined with over the last few months. And I want you to give you the platform here to explain a little bit more about the escalation trap. And really, the most important thing right now is where we are in this trap, because I believe that it is literally spiraling out of control. So I'd like to get your thoughts as we're recording this in early August.
Thank you again for giving me an opportunity to talk to your audience. An escalation trap occurs when an attacker uses mostly air power to strike targets and is tactically successful. The bombs hit targets. In this case, bombs killed leaders, destroyed missile launchers, but the attacker becomes strategically weaker. And the reason is because air power alone rarely is going to achieve these major objectives. So the escalation trap, it doesn't only happen with air power, but sometimes I call it the smart bomb trap, because the illusion of control that comes with smart bombs, we have PowerPoint presentations, people in uniform with stars, and it is true that the bombs will hit within 95% of the time within 3 feet or less of the target. You can actually hit a chair with our precision bombs. That creates an illusion of not just tactical success, but strategic success. The problem is that's the trap. That's the trap. And we fell into the trap. Other American presidents have fallen into this trap. Other countries, Putin has fallen into the trap. But the trap we're in now with Iran, this is probably the most wicked escalation trap for America in history, and maybe just in history. It is that difficult because every month that this war has proceeded, you have seen President Trump has tried a new tactical strategy. First, it was leadership bombing. That didn't collapse the regime in Iran. Then it was shifting over to 6 weeks of a bombing campaign against mostly military targets. These are the launcher. This was the launcher campaign. And it did. We did score some success. We were not quite as tactically successful as some might have thought, but nonetheless, we did knock out a fair portion of Iran's missiles and missile launchers. And then we shifted over to, but that didn't lead to success. Iran did not buckle there either. And then we shifted over to the U.S. blockade, which again was tactically successful. We could stop ships. We could even attack ships. But it produced not just strategic failure, but strategic weakness. Now, what's the key weakness in all of these points? It is Iran taking Hormuz. In every single, what happened in this war is within the first few days, Iran lashed back, and with its drones, it also used mines, it effectively seized control of Hormuz. And this was fully predictable, Cyrus. So 3 days before the first bombs fell on the Escalation Trap Substack, I published the very first post called The Smart Bomb Trap. And this piece is the product of 20 years of modeling the bombing of Iran. I do this every year in my class called Strategy. That's the nickname for it at the University of Chicago. I end that class in the spring with a 90-minute simulation of what would happen if we bombed Iran, the nuclear sites, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been doing that for over 20 years. And so the stages I lay out: stage 1, the bombs would be tactically successful. Stage 2, Iran would lash back, seize Hormuz. Stage 3, we would be caught in a ground power dilemma where we are going to face a choice. Either we concede and Iran becomes truly a regional hegemon. It's not just a matter of ending a war with Hormuz. Iran has an enormous capacity now to become far more powerful than it ever has been in its modern history. And this will really change the dynamics of world politics. or we either accept that outcome, or we have to fight to take it back. Iran's not just going to give it up, and they're not just going to sue for peace, because what's occurring here is a shift in the balance of power. That's what it means to become strategically weaker, and that's why Iran is just not going to give this up. So that was the prediction 3 days before the bombs fell, and then the bombs fell, and literally everything happened. And then the additional steps that President Trump took, these are also in my classes in strategy. I teach for weeks about the limits of punishment bombing campaigns, the air campaigns, the limits of them without ground forces. I've been studying this and publishing on this for 30 years. I've taught for the U.S. Air Force conventional targeting strategy. So, and also economic blockades, economic sanctions. So all of that is not just material that I'm kind of have a passing familiarity with. This has been much of my life's work for 35 years, and updated, not just publish a book, put it on a shelf and you're done with it. But in my classes at the University of Chicago, I'm very privileged to be teaching really quite smart folks. So I can update everything on an ongoing basis. And that's why it's actually one of the more popular classes at the university. And it presents frameworks that for the students, and these are for undergrads through PhD students, that they can use not just simply to take a test and get graded on it, but they can use as they go on. If they go on to get into government service, as many do, if they go on into the military, as some do, if they go on to get PhDs or go on into academe, or go into the think tank world. So and also the private sector, by the way, because increasingly there are risk components of, say, United Airlines and so forth that need to have better frameworks for how they understand. So these are the frameworks that I've been using and have been using for decades, and they have been extremely valuable. I've also advised every White House from 2001 to 2024, again, about these issues of escalation. Not, of course, always not about the escalation of Iran. That's the unique one today. But there have been many issues related to escalation over the last 20 years. And so these are the basic frameworks that I have developed. And I've decided to bring them out to the world, and I had no idea that they would be, the reception would be so strong. It's really quite wonderful, and it's sometimes overwhelming, and it's just terrific. But I really think that this shows there is an enormous hunger for depth and real substance. And I'm doing my best to keep the Substack community here ahead of the risks, and so it's really quite humbling and quite an honor to be involved in that.
Well, Professor Pape, I want to say it's just an honor to be able to interview you for our YouTube channel and to share your message with the world, because I do believe you are the best expert that that can really dissect the truth about what's happening in Iran and really come at it from a pro-America standpoint. I mean, you want obviously the America to do well, but you're not afraid to say the truth and understand, look, we're making, very big mistakes here. There's a pattern here. There's systems here. And again, you did mention your Substack. Everybody, we are going to put links to Professor Pape's Substack down below. It is a fantastic follow. If you really are interested in this, which I know you are because you're watching this YouTube video, I want you to make sure that you're subscribing to Professor Pape's Substack. We'll put those links down below. But Professor, you've argued for a long time that this war is not really about Iran. Maybe it's a little bit more about whether the United States can still shape events in the Middle East. And my question is, have we already crossed that line? Is this a point where Washington is no longer driving control of the events anymore? It's just simply reacting to them?
Yes, actually, this is one of the big consequences of this war, and why we should never have fought this war. This isn't just another Iraq. It's not another Afghanistan. It's not even another Vietnam. this escalation trap is worse and will have more devastating consequences than any that I think we have seen in American history. And the real issue here is, as I've been explaining in my writings, is that the 2026 Iran war is the inverse of the 1991 Gulf War. So when the Cold War ended in 1991, the Soviet Union receded as a major player in international politics for quite some time, and of course collapsed, and it became Russia. ... But it wasn't just the end of a Cold War. Immediately thereafter, in 1990, Saddam Hussein seized Kuwait and Iraq. He led Iraq, and Iraq had the fourth largest army in the world, 1 million troops in arms. And he took about half of those and invaded Kuwait. That's 42 divisions. They had just come out of the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years. So these are battle-hardened divisions. And it was not just taking Kuwait, but Saddam Hussein put his forces right up on the Kuwaiti border with Saudi Arabia, essentially threatening to take parts of Saudi Arabia. In other words, that would unify all the oil in Iraq, all the oil in Kuwait, and the oil in Saudi Arabia. That is that dreaded oil hegemon, and Iraq would control 22% or so of the world's oil. And notice that's almost identical to what Iran has effectively done. But back in 1990, the United States waged a war. It starts in January 1991, and in 43 days, a 39-day air war, a 4-day ground war, the United States kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, the most stunning victory that America had perhaps ever. It was really an amazingly stunning victory. And to give you some sense of that, we brought 10,000 body bags with us to fight that war. And how many died? 147. Now, we don't want anybody to die, but my goodness, we didn't realize how powerful we were, because what happened in that war was America rolled out this precision technology, which had not really been on display before. This was the shock and awe campaign, the stealth fighters, satellite technology, GPS. This was all new. And it was the precision revolution. Write a lot about this in my book, Bombing to Win. And I was teaching for the U.S. Air Force right at this time. So this was a stunning victory. And it wasn't stunning just for the United States. It was stunning for everybody around the world. Let me just pick China, for example. China didn't just observe these events. Before the 91 Gulf War, China had 3.5 million troops in arms. After the Gulf War, they cut it to 2 million. Think about that. Why did they dump all that? Because those were nothing but targets for our precision military. No way to stand up to America. They knew they had to turn themselves upside down to stand if they were ever going to have a chance at dealing with the United States, country after country after country. So this was the true unipolar power of the United States, the unipolar moment. And this is why those European governments cut their defense budgets, because they thought, oh, well, America, they got escalation dominance. They're going to defeat any enemy quickly. And there's no cost. This war is no cost here. So why are they building? And in fact, in the 1990s, with this amazing precision revolution, the United States cut its military budget. So this wasn't just our European allies. And so we did have forever wars. We had terrorism, of course, but those wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, except for the 9/11 attacks directly, there wasn't a major cost felt by the public. So there was no economic downturn in our forever wars. There were economic downturns in the 20 years of our forever wars. They were due to the no dock crisis for the housing crisis in 2007 and 8. But this was so what's happened in 2026 with the Iran war is the inverse of all that. The new rules of power are America can be beaten. It's not America that has escalation dominance. It's Iran that has escalation dominance. It's not America that has the precision revolution and just the high, this high end military complex. Iran has precision power now, and it's cheap, and it can be produced en masse, and it can be produced in greater mass than America's very expensive boutique interceptors. So what is, and then the consequences are tremendous for the United States, for the world, because of the cost of the shock to the world economy, which is only beginning. It hasn't even fully hit yet. This is the opposite of the 91 Gulf War. This is the war that is going to define the decline of American hegemony, not the rise of American preeminence. And it's creating power vacuums already. So Trump in the last week has tacoed again, right? So he made a bunch of threats and then he pulled back. And this is the fifth time, by my count, at least 5 times that I can document this precisely. And maybe there's a few more. But what has happened with those tacos is these are strategic paralysis by the United States. We are in the escalation trap. Trump is fumbling between a dilemma. He's on the horns of a dilemma. There's no good way out for him. But that paralysis is not for the United States, doesn't mean paralysis for Iran and other actors in the region. They are not paralyzed. They're going forward to gain power, try to gain more influence, because as America's power declines, it creates power vacuum. Power vacuum. And guess what? Power vacuums don't like to stay vacuums. Mm-hmm. Power rivalries come in to fill the vacuums, and that's what you're seeing. That's why Iran is exerting itself to gain leverage. It's initiating attacks. That's why it's you see now Iran's proxies, the Houthis, for example, doing similar things, similar attacks with Saudi Arabia. And then you see Saudi Arabia initiating some attacks. What you are seeing is a classic situation of a spiral. This is the spiral phase of the escalation trap. Cyrus, you mentioned when we started the feeling things are getting out of control. They've been getting out of control since the very first bomb fell on February 28. Now it's just growing. And one of the reasons it's getting out of control now is as the war widens and that power vacuum continues to occur, you're getting more actors involved. And they each can independently use force. And America, they're not always calling America here to say, hey, do you mind if we do this or that? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And that's true of our allies, but the ones who are not our allies, the other side, they're never calling us. So, and they're not, and this isn't this necessarily highly coordinated action where Iran has now become the puppet master, pulling the strings on each and every attack. That's not quite it. What's happening is we have a power vacuum, and in the power vacuum, this is the spiral phase of the escalation trap. More and more actors are now involved. It's the United States, it's Iran, it's Israel, it's Hezbollah, it's the Houthis, it's Saudi Arabia, it's the Iran proxies in Iraq, and so what you are seeing is this phase, and it's coming because this war has some really unique characteristics, and those characteristics are devastatingly bad for the United States. And you're right, I'm a big believer in American primacy. I want America to be the richest, the strongest country in the world. And what's happening is this is going to unfortunately decline over time. So when we won that 1991 Gulf War, this wasn't just about military victory, and because some people think, oh, that's what those military folks think about. Right. No, this set up the era of globalization, which made trade a lot cheaper around the world. Trade as a fraction of world product grew from 38% in 1990 to 62% in 2020. And that's a function of that preeminent American power able to bring stability to the trading routes around the world. And more than the physical stability, the confidence that things would remain stable. That's why insurance rates are so low. That's why you could have just-in-time commercial action where, we right now, of course, outside my home in Chicago, all I have to do is push some buttons on Amazon, and within sometimes 4 hours, I mean, think about that, you get product right to the door. I mean, it's really quite stunning when you think about it. And and a lot of times, for instance, you want a table and you're going to make a table. That table's made in India. That table's made in Asia. And so it's literally the case that almost all the things that we now take for granted hinge on that cheap global commerce. Well, that's going to get much more expensive. And it's already more expensive because of the oil, the energy. People have focused on that. But this is going to ripple. This consequence is, it's not just America has lost power in the Middle East. Oh, my goodness gracious. Why did President Xi and Trump have a summit? And what does President Xi say to Trump to his face? You are a declining power.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? Power vacuum. What does that mean? More tension. Someone's going to fill that vacuum. And so you suddenly there's a lot more nervousness, so to speak. And what that means is uncertainty. And as the years go by, there's every reason to expect these consequences will simply unfold.